Very good evening, everyone. On the 125th birth anniversary of our very prominent Indian freedom fighter, Netaji Subhash Chandra Bose, Tell Me Your Story wishes everyone a very happy Netaji Jayanti. So, we welcome all of you to yet another poetry episode of Where Can You Find the Stars under Voices and Verses with Antara and Deyasini. As the topic of our today's discussion is the blue stars thinking, the importance of post pandemic poetry, we are honored to present Dustin Pickering and Dr. Rupali Sarkar Gore as our esteemed guests who will recite their poems today evening. Submissions of stories and poems are also going on for the story project Disobedient Women, and registrations are also open for the writing program Season 5. For further details, please visit www.tellmeyourstory.biz. So let me introduce our esteemed guests. Dustin Pickering is founder of Transcendent Zero Press and founding editor at Harbinger Asylum. He has contributed writing to Huffington Post, Cafe de Census Every Day, The Statesman India, Colorado Review, World Literature Today, and several other publications. He is author of the recent poetry collections The Stone and the Square and Only and Again. He lives in Houston, Texas, USA. The first poem concerns fireflies being crushed in a car's windshield. The second is about love being an ascent and offering to God. And the third is a message of hope and trust. We welcome you, Dustin. Thank you for being with us today.
Thank you.
And
Now,
we have with us Dr. Rupali Sarkar Gore, PhD. She is a poet, performer, writer, animal and social justice activist, gardener, and recyclist. She served as an associate professor of English, Delhi University, and taught creative writing at the Indira Gandhi National Open University. A widely published poet and writer, she has featured in peer reviewed journals and served on academic panels around the world. Her research interests lie in the field of gender, aging, war, disability, and post colonial literature. Her book, The Twice Colonized Women in African Literature, is a seminal text on the subject. In 2020 and 21, she co edited In All the Spaces, Diverse Voices in Global Women's Poetry and Earth, Fire, Water, Wind. Her poetry, included in international anthologies published from the US, UK, Nepal, and India, is archived in the Stanford University Pandemic Digital Archives. She is a co-founder of Saraswati eZine for Literature and Arts and poetry editor for AWS eZine and is a columnist for e-journal Different Truths. She is also consulting editor for Different Truths as founder director of Yuvati, an organization working for educational and employment opportunities for girls and boys across India. She runs a special initiative called Mera Kitab Ghar, the Backyard Book Club. So Dr. Rupali Gore has traveled extensively and is passionate about the welfare of military families. She lives in Meerut, India with her retired military spouse and their three rescued dogs. We welcome you, Rupali Di, and thank you for being with us today.
Thank you so much for inviting me, Antara. And I know the kind of hard work you put on me to get me on this on this podium
No,
to
it's
get
a
me to write.
pleasure. It's a pleasure, ma'am.
Lovely.
So, so we welcome both of you, Dustin and Rupali Di. So,
thank you.
coming to our today's session, the Blue Stars thinking the importance of post-pandemic poetry. So, we know that stars are an integral part of nature. It is a wonderful creation of universe. But in the present century, very few of us can actually perceive or connect with it. Stars are just not celestial bodies twinkling in a clear blue sky, but there is much more to it. In the past centuries, we have read about many poets who celebrated nature through their poetry, which had lost its instinctive connect with the urban life in the present 21st century. Until the COVID 19 pandemic struck us, which brought everything to a standstill, leaving people restricted at their respective homes and unable to do much except stand and stare at the stars, skies. So, in a way, It was all about admiring the nature from the windows and balconies. During our lockdown days, we still now remember. But this unexpected hiatus has created lakhs of old digital poets who have received public attention as their poetry went viral on different social media platforms, which may be addressed as post-pandemic poetry. So, without further ado, I would like to invite Dr. Rupali Sarkar Gore to recite her poems. So, Didi, you please go on with your poems.
Well, thank you so much, Antara. I can't find the second one, so I'll have to look for it.
No problem, Didi. Just
I
read the
wrote
first
this,
one.
since you are asking about the pandemic and the post-pandemic time, I'll give you a small introduction. My poem is just 2.5 or 3 minutes, actually. It looks very long on paper, but the thing is that, as we live in this pandemic, it's still on, we've been getting very, very lonely and isolated, and we've sort of began to perhaps enjoy our isolation and even getting very frustrated and cut off from our young people and so on and so forth. Your program has certainly made me realize that there is a world, there's a lot of young people, and I think you address young people in your programs who are actually looking forward to another time. And when we talk of normal and new normal, it's all past. So my poem is really about, it's like a conversation between an older person, a grandmother, and a grandchild. And it says, where do I see the stars, you ask? Once it was in the hours of the night that I had glimpsed the stars, clear pieces of shining crystal, like a beauteous chandelier hanging from the ink blue sky, myriads of twinkling drops of light. It was summer then. Now, in the winter of my discontent, I cower fearfully. The night is darker now, and the stars are out of sight. Just then, my child's child walked in, stretching his computer tired back. No football in the sun for my grandson, no friends to frolic with. Only the kitchen, the refrigerator, and the thawing heat of meat in the whirring microwave. Where do you see the stars? I asked him. I don't see them anymore. The stars, Nani. Nani is the grandmother. The stars, Nani. Where are your spectacles? You, I see, are missing the spectacle. Can't you hear the whirring universe? The twinkling, beckoning stars, Nani? Have you forgotten or are you forgetting? You taught me to talk to the twinkling stars. It is you who taught me to wonder. You made me look up above and see diamonds in the sky. Ah, yes, I sighed. Those precious diamonds, those buried trees, those millenniums, and then the stars were seen. My stars, Nani, are in a happy place, in a world which is diverse with lots of space for everybody, where my stars have no color, no creed, no gender, a world free of hunger and borders which do not define me. Darling child, I too had dreamt of that once. I too had smelt the roses once. They were once my stars too. Oh no, Nani, don't be sad. Your dreams have come true. Stars are happening all around you, but you are not looking. Your patch of sky is twinkling right here beside you. Here, let me clean your spectacles. Sit down and talk to me. Talk to my young friends, Nani. They will show the stars to you. Talk to my young friends, Nani. They will show the stars to you. You will see the wonder and the grandeur of the stars fill the galaxies around you. Don't hanker for the days gone by. Don't hanker for the days gone by. Just simply, softly bid them goodbye. There's a true world awaiting us, free from hatred and violence, one where nature is supreme. Don't cry and mourn, Nani. Let your happy thoughts roam. Look, look, the dark sky is full of stars. The stars are wondering who we are. Thank you.
Wow.
There's this poem. Can I read that later on, Antara, because I can't find it. So
Surely,
maybe that's
surely. I think it was a wonderful narrative, where nature has been worshipped and where the stars have been actually depicted in such a way that has crossed all the shackles and barriers of violence and hatred. So thank you, Rupalidi, for
thank
reading. So now I will come to Dustin. Dustin, you please go on with your poem. Please read your first poem. Yes.
My first poem concerns the respected and feared plague mask. I'm using it as a metaphor for kind of the suffocation of isolation in a way. And as we know, the plague mask was basically, it looked kind of like a bird beak. And so I kind of use that and I stretched that across to the stars. And so there's a kind of metaphor there. It's called Surviving the Plague Mask. We cannot breathe this air. This costume will prevent our mouths from contracting and relaxing from breath itself, and we wear the mask today. How does the unfolding begin? I breathe, and my lungs gather the rolling air from my tongue to create the art we need to thrive. Poetry is the voice of myth, that subconscious crawl from cranium skies to stars of the upper abyss. My tongue will not be blue and silent. I will breathe my heritage, and the future will dawn.
Wow,
Thank
what a wonderful depiction and connection of poetry with stars and nature, and also, speaks of hope at the end.
you. Mm-hmm.
That's wonderful, Dustin. Thank you. Would you
Thank
like to read your second poem, Dustin?
Sure, I can do that. This one, as we know, a lot of the aftermath of the plague. I'm sort of making a stretch of a comparison from the plague, the bubonic plague, to the current pandemic, and I really do believe that the future will be hopeful, and that we will have a sort of, as I call this poem, renaissance of a new understanding of humankind, and a fresh, a parallel to the times of that period. We'll have a fresh understanding of ourselves after all this is done, and a better outlook of things in general once we're able to come back together as a human community. So, and I also use the sort of pun on the word anthology, which the word means a gathering of flowers. And so I'm using that pun in a way in this poem. It's called Renaissance.
Please go ahead.
Thank you. A flowering from a gathering of flowers. Green and translucent are the stems as our humanity is revealed through hope. The petals fall like shooting stars to the earth, blue as rain in sunlight, giving life again to this heated atmosphere where we are lost to the vindictive orders. This poem is a mind of its own, redefining human nature and the language of its contents. This poem is fire burning from Prometheus's hand, and flowers gather on the stones.
Wow, excellent. Again, it connects nature with humanity. It's excellent the way you have portrayed it, Dustin. Excellent. And the pun you have used, it's awesome. It's
Thank you
awesome.
so much.
So coming to Rupalidi. Rupalidi, would you like to read your second poem now? Rupalidi, you are on mute. Please unmute yourself. Rupalidi, you are not audible. You are not audible, Rupalidi. We cannot hear you. We cannot hear. You're not audible, actually. We cannot hear you. Just increase the volume.
There were too many things coming
Yes,
here.
yes, yes. Now it is audible. Yes, now we can hear
You can
you.
hear me? Okay.
Yes, please read your
There-
second poem.
Okay. So in my solitary days, you can hear me?
Yes,
Sunte
we can
Pacho?
hear you. Yes, yes,
In
exactly,
my
Rupal.
solitary days, these solitary days make me crave for you. These solitary days make me crave for you. I long to smile and hug, but when I had everything, I gave people the shrug. I want my space, I cried in anger. Leave me alone, I said. Sorry, I'm very busy. My throbbing heart is dead. Today, in solitude, I learn by my boats I should not have burned. I must love the squirrels and the ant. The trees I must learn to hug. So this love for nature, which has grown during this solitude, is, in very short, I've tried to put that, when we had everything, we really never wanted to meet anybody. We'd always be running around, never looked at nature. The solitude has also given us something.
This poem makes us realize the bliss of solitude, Rupalidi. And we have the scope and opportunity to admire nature as well at the same. So this is wonderful portrayal of solitude again. And
Thank you.
now come, yes. Thank you both of you for reading your respective poems. So now coming to this the topic of our discussion, which is the blue stars thinking and the importance of post-pandemic poetry. So when something serious like a pandemic happens, we tend to take a refuge in a poem that would offer little peace and solace. For I think a poem that helps us feel less separated or isolated in this time of social distancing. So it doesn't always take a pandemic to feel lonely because some of the most famous poems, as far as I remember, are about solitude, which is not quite astonishing. So now coming to Dustin, do you
Mhm.
think that as we are all confined in our homes due to this pandemic, verses on isolation can really help us see that social life is always about distance, one way or another?
Well, I think that the human condition, as we experience it, is lonely in general, and it can be very isolating. And I think that the fact that we're confined within a body and one mind prevents us from really bonding in a way that we sometimes would desire. And I do think that poetry has a way of reaching through empathy to from one mind to another. And literature is really powerful in the respect that it can be an experience within you can be reading someone else's thoughts and someone else's mind as you're sitting there with a book in your hand, and you experience that world. And so I think that it's a good bridge between one person and another, and one world and another, because it's not my experiences. Say Charles Dickens writing, and his world is not what I've maybe not experienced, but it's something enough in common that I can relate, and I can feel what's going on in that in his narratives. And so I think that definitely the truth is that we're isolated as individuals in a lot of ways, but we're able to bond through the arts, through culture. It's a good way of communicating and cross-pollinating ideas. I think it assists us in so many ways, other than the emotional side. I mean, it assists us economically. The arts are really powerful for us to get people moving and motivated. And if without the arts, I think that life would be a mistake.
True, very true. Uh, Coming to Rupalidi, so what do you think about it? That being confined in our homes during this COVID-19 situation. So such verses, can it really help us to see that social life is always about distance in a way or the other? What is your perspective? Again, you're not audible. Again, you're not audible.
Happening.
face some network issues on this.
Now,
Yes, now,
can
yes,
you hear
yes,
me?
yes. Yes, we can hear
I
you.
think every time I put on that some gadgets to listen more clearly, I go off there. Yes, isolate. This, it was so sudden. That isolation was so official. It wasn't something that we had chosen to do. It was. It also accompanied fear. The fear of death. And all that we were listening to was friends dying, their children dying, or somebody dying. And so, in that sense, that this pandemic solitude is very different from one that you choose to be solitary or be alone and read or write or something like that. This was so, so those who were little privileged, who had jobs and who were getting paid while they were, they were okay. But the distancing, I think, did a lot, and there was a lot of, there was of course, among the better half, people who were better economically, they enjoyed it in the beginning, and people who got locked in with their families. But we have to think of those who lost their jobs in this terrible pandemic, who had problems with food. You know what happened in India? When people were running to their villages, they were hungry, they were dying. So it's very difficult to, seize this solitariness of the pandemic as a kind of, shall we say, utopian world. But yes, for people like us, who were locked up in better places and, in a privileged spaces, we wrote a lot. I think poetry, and we communicated through electronic gadgets and so on and so forth. And we also learned to about the fact that we are all in the same boat. Earlier people would say, I'll give you for example my. Somebody who's in America, would say, oh, India is full of germs, and suddenly these germs were everywhere. This thing was everywhere, and it was everybody's. So people who turned up their nose. So there was a sudden realization that the human species, we as a human species, that I think became very important, and literature came out a lot from that understanding.
Very, very true. Very true, Rupali. So my next question will cater to somewhat what Rupali said towards the end. So now coming to Dustin, that when people were stuck at homes, they were finding new opportunities for creativity. Like the contagion we were fighting, the poetry of social distance was not confined to a limited space. So, what is your opinion on the same?
Well, I don't think poetry should be confined in any way in any particular space or time. And you have like poets like Wilke who wrote of the kind of existential loneliness, and his major theme, it seems to be, in his work was that. As I mentioned earlier, that as people were pretty much alone in the world. I mean, that's the existential condition, and I think that poetry is, again, I could say that. It really has a way of stretching across time and space. And I know that people, as Rupali mentioned, very much so, that we're coming from a position of privilege as people that are educated and have good homes and live well. And there are a lot of people out there that did not have that during this period. And it's really sad to know that there's people out, in the streets still, some people are actually, shoplifting to get food and things of that nature. And it's just a really tough time for a lot of people. And I just wanted to bring awareness to that. It's happening here in the United States. It's probably happening in all kinds of places in the world, because the economic devastation that we faced during this pandemic in these last 2 years has affected the entire planet. And it's been really tough. But as I said, I think poetry, for those of us who have the abilities and the know-how to really relate and understand, I don't think it should be confined to any particular space. But I do think that poetry is written in solitude. The best poetry is written in any kind of solitude, and it can especially be something that reaches across during difficult times or in difficult places, that during revolutions, during times of famine, or just when there's a lot of apocalyptic destruction, just things going on that are very difficult to deal with for people's minds. And I think some people like us, we can really sit and listen and read poetry, and then those that are not able to, I mean, those are people that we should really be thinking of during this time.
Okay. Yes, true, very true. Solitude itself, it helps, to thrive, I guess. So coming to Rupali Di, what do you think? Like this pandemic, we are fighting out this pandemic. So the poetry of social distance is not limited, not confined to a particular space. So what do you think?
I would like you to be a little more clear about what you mean by that social distancing.
Social distancing, I meant that like during this pandemic, we are separated, we are isolated from one another. Isn't it so? But
Yeah.
this pandemic also has led to creativity. It has led to various opportunities, for creativity. So do you think that poetry of social distance is not confined to a limited space? We as human beings, we are separated, we are isolated from one another, but poetry is not. What is your take on this? What do you feel about it?
I
Or how
think
do
that
you feel about
the social distancing, I'm constantly conscious of the fact that the pandemic has given a lot of opportunities to people, but of a particular class of people
it?
who have
Yes,
got
very
this
true.
opportunity. You see, living in India, it is very difficult for me not to be connected. And, my poetry is very connected to the people who are around me. I'm not able to really sing songs of love and other things at all. I'm not able to write, those kind of poems. So when I see social distancing, I look at the opportunities I have got. I've got a lot of opportunities. I've met Dustin, I've met Antara, I'm bringing out anthologies in which, even Dustin has contributed to it, and Antara, you're going to be doing that. And it's been wonderful. I've made lots of friends. I've been enriched by the social distancing. Perhaps if there wasn't this, many of us just didn't, we were much more lonelier. It's like being lonely when you have a crowd. Nothing can be worse than that, when you have people around you and you're lonely. But if you're alone and you're connected, it has been wonderful for many, many of us, many, many of us. But we mustn't forget that this social distancing has also destroyed people's mental health. It has brought about a lot of conflict within families, that the social distancing, they can be the reason for us to write also. We must write about these things. We must focus on it, and the number of divorces that have taken place during the pandemic, the number of relationships that have broken up because we've been confined, sometimes, and everybody is not all alone because as a family, domestic violence has increased, and I think that many of us who are poets, especially poets have a responsibility, and the social distancing has helped us to look at it also. And I think, Antara, you and Deyasini and all are doing a great job because you're looking at young people. I was reading what the work you do, and I found that you address young people, and that is very, very important. It is very important that we prepare the young now to psychologically face a new world, a brave new world, a really brave new world, and I think all of you can, be part of that and write about it and talk about it. And thank you so much because you're doing that work. It's a very, very important work.
It's an honor and a pleasure, Rupali Di. And thank you so much and for your such words. Those words were very inspiring. And as you were telling that, yes, pandemic, actually, what I feel, Rupali Di, that basically for urbanites, we did not, I think they did not have time, before. But, this lockdown, this pandemic has given a lot of time for self introspection. In fact, it happened with me. So I think that is also a part that people were able to, especially urban people, they were able to get time,
But
for
I can,
themselves.
Antara, I just cannot get away from, I live in a house, I'm telling you, which has nearly 20 rooms. I live in a very old mansion sort of a house. But I'm very, very conscious of the people who lost their jobs, people who would
Mhm.
come, and work for us and they were
Absolutely.
earning
That's the
something.
hardcore reality.
Didn't allow them to come because we were afraid of being, and a number of young people, even in the urban areas, whose salaries were cut, who didn't have jobs. Now, when you don't have jobs, you don't have money to feed, food on the table. We all work for food on the table. At the end of the day, we are working for that food on the table. And literature, of course, comes out of a lot of suffering. That is true. Great literature has come out of great suffering. If you look at all the
Absolutely.
revolutions and the Russian Revolution and so on, so much of wonderful poetry has come out of it. You know, and even in our, when we were having the farmers, what's it called, agitation with for many many days and months, they were sitting out in the cold. It was just poetry and literature that was keeping them alive. People were singing, they were reciting poetry, they were writing poetry. And even, now we're going to have a Republic Day, and our freedom movement is all about poetry. Our national
Very
anthems
true.
are,
Mhm.
so it comes out of suffering, it comes out of revolution. And I would love people to write that kind of poetry. I want them to come out and talk about these things and, whatever it is. And there's young people who are now gender free. They don't care, whether you are man, woman, third gender, or what is your relationship with anybody. They have nothing. They are so wonderful. They have accepted people with their color. They don't shame people for anything. They're so, I see my grandson, he's 13, he lives in the United States. And he's so complete in his understanding of people, you know. And I
So I
love
think
that.
Rupali, somewhere literature and poetry, it gives us the
Yes.
scoop so that we can hope for something better in our
Is
future. Not only
absolutely.
for us, even for the people who are residing in rural areas, for the poor and the destitutes. I
You
guess
know how
poetry.
difficult how difficult it was for you to get me to write a poem on where are the stars? I mean, where are your stars? Because depression, mental health problems, these are all coming to all of us. And with this new thing
Mhm.
that's happening, we were thought, oh, it's all going to be over. But then, I'm not, I have no ego. I'm ready to learn. And I learned from you what exactly we've done. And I realized, oh my God, I have young people around me. I was a teacher. My students are so full of life. They all want to say something, do something. And I have to learn from them. We have to learn from them now.
So, Dustin, would you like to add something to this? Please.
Well, as far as young people, I think it's wonderful that that there's a time now that we can actually sit and learn the history of poetry, and I think that it would be great for for people that are sitting at home and have the time and the ability to to go
Yes.
to libraries and read and learn a lot about history, about poetry, about the arts, and take that and cultivate that. And as Rupali was saying, we can write a literature of revolution, a literature of hope, and I think that it's true that literature comes from suffering, and great arts come from some of the deepest wells of the human spirit that are wanting to break out and come
Yes.
out, and it's amazing that there's, even though there's so much trouble in the world today as we see it, there's still a time and space for some of us to be able to create something wonderful and beautiful that brings light to the world and can actually be like the sun to a to the green earth, and bring more rejuvenation and light to our planet, and maybe guide us into the future to where we some maybe 500 years from now, people will be looking back at this time and saying, wow, they must have had it really hard back then during that pandemic and during the wars and everything going on in the world, and the tensions that were escalating, and the global warming and everything else. But they were able, as Rupali said, they have enough hope. The young people had enough hope that they no longer really judged you according to your race or gender or whatever orientation you had, or of such. And so there's a lot of good things going on, and there's a lot of hard things going on. And so I think that this is a really ripe time for the world literature to flourish.
So, coming to your second poem, Dustin, so we are really looking forward to some Renaissance.
I think
Would you
so.
say, would you put it that way?
Yeah, I think so. I think we are. I think there's going to be, one of the big things about the Renaissance was that it developed an understanding of human nature that was very radically different than people had believed before. And I think that's something that we're going to be looking at in the near future. It's already emerging. It's already pulling up from the ground up. And I think it's something that'll be fascinating to see where we take all of these ideas that are clashing. And there's so many ideas. I think it's really fruitful when you see a lot of ideas fighting with each other, and they mesh into it's like a clay that's being twisted and turned, and just it's a really fascinating process for me to watch the world as we see it now. Even though it's in conflict and there's so many things going on that are horrible to even speak of, that's just part of the growth of the human spirit.
Excellent. It was so wonderfully expressed, both of you, Rupali and Dustin. You wonderfully explained. So Rupali, coming to you now. Rupali.
I believe she's muted.
Yes. Am I audible to you, Rupali?
Yeah, very much.
Okay. So now, so we were talking a lot about post-pandemic poetry. How will it be like? We are going through a turmoil situation, and hopefully we will be coming out of this. So, what would be your advice or suggestions for the students who have urged towards poetry, and also for the upcoming poets like us, with reference to the post-pandemic situation?
To young people who want to write?
Yes, students, even students, young students, children who have interest in writing poems towards
what I'm saying, and I'd probably be repeating myself, that we have to now be very grounded in the reality, as well as while we are showing the utopian world that we intend to inherit. So I think firstly young people must be, when they're writing poetry, their language skills should be honed. They should definitely pay attention to their language skills. And there are a lot of sites from where they can learn all this. So, it's easy to do that now. And they should also be very aware of their surroundings. They should be aware of, what is happening around them. And they should not, be afraid. Writing should be fearless. When we write, we should not be afraid to write, that what is somebody going to think of me? No. Poetry is the most powerful expression that human beings have been given. I think it's a gift that we've been given. It is here that we can say what we want to, and we can say it very well, without, being. Sometimes we can be very cunning and clever. So that's where language comes in. So I think they should look at their world. They should write at the subjects of their world. They should look at every person, every creature. That's why the second small poem that I wrote is that now we should even look at the ants and the birds. There are themes there too. You can write about anything, and be joyful about what you're writing. Be concerned, be careful what you're saying, and also express any, they say be positive, be positive. Why? There's so much of negativity also. Let's also put that into poetry. Why not? How do you tell somebody, if I'm feeling very lonely and depressed, and somebody just turns up and says, oh, come on, be positive. Is it possible? It's not possible. But you can sublimate it by writing. You can sublimate your loneliness by writing. So I think for young people, it's a great weapon. They are the ones who suffered the most during the pandemic. And Antara, you're so young, and Dustin, you're a young person. You people have been most isolated. we've still been within some member of the family has been with us or something, but the struggle that young people are very worried about, very young people. What is it
Even
going
the
to
young
be like?
children, Rupali, even the young
Especially
children.
especially
Hmm.
young children, what are they going to, and sometimes you see a video where, and somebody says, oh, a smile makes all the difference. I said, who's looking at smile? We're only masked. We're wearing masks. Where's the smile? When did I last smile? Maybe today on your program, Antara. I'm smiling and laughing. When did I last smile, really? So I think young people must write. And I must tell you that there are a lot of young people writing wonderful things. So any of you bringing out anthologies, try and get young people to be. Otherwise, I always see all these fuddy duddies, all of us are in it. Any anthology coming out, we all hop into it. But let the young people come. Let them express themselves. So search them out. There are many of them, many of them writing.
I would
And
also like to add one thing, referring to the virtual medium, through which we are communicating right now, right? As of now, I guess it has offered bit of respite, to communicate with one another.
yes,
Virtual platforms. It has at least given some respite,
Hmm.
so that we can connect with the world, we can connect with people.
I look
So,
forward to it. I
yes,
look forward
at
to it.
least
And
we are
next
able
time
to express our
uh,
thoughts and
I
ideas through it.
get you people onto another Zoom, group of poets. It's a multilingual group of poets. You can all be on it. And what I do is that the day I'm reading a poem, I tell people I know you be on that particular session. Because they have 2, 3 sessions. And I say you be on that session. So for me, it's like getting together. Having a party because my friends are there and we're all reading poems and we're all seeing each other. Seeing each other is so important. Visibility is
Absolutely.
so important.
So coming now to Dustin. So Dustin, what would be your advice and suggestions for the students and for the upcoming poets with reference to this situation we are into right now?
As I mentioned, it's not necessarily completely a curse to be isolated or confined to your house or to your locale. I mean, you can spend some time, as Rupali said, to hone your craft, to hone your language, to study the history of poetry. And I think it's very important if you want to be involved in poetry. I know we've said it's a solitary activity in a lot of ways it is, but also if you want to get the work out there, networking is very necessary. And I think that the best thing to do is if you want to be involved in the poetry scene, I guess you could call it, start a literary journal, host your own events, get active. And when that time comes for that, I mean, we can do it online now, but when the time comes when we're able to get back out and be around one another again, get active, be involved with your colleagues, your friends, and your family, and just hope for the best. And just I wouldn't expect the world to become a utopian overnight. It's not going to be perfect, but it's going to be. I think it'll be like we had a lot of tensions, and when those things start to relax and we start to see some renewal of the spirit, I think that will be something that will be very promising especially for very young people. But I think there's going to be a lot of intergenerational trauma going on that needs to also be considered for the future. We may need to think of some ways that help people cope with what's been going on and help, especially very, very young people may not completely understand what's happening. But for students, I think we could be spending time studying the art of poetry, as we have so much free time now and so much isolation, and learning to what they're kind of in a middle ground right now. Is like teenagers, they're kind of like in a middle part of they're old enough to understand what's happening, not as the younger people. So they're going to have to be a bridge between the very young people and the older people that are experiencing this. And so I think they should be prepared for quite a responsibility.
That was absolutely, we all have to take the onus upon us,
Mm-hmm.
so that we all can come out victorious out of this situation. Isn't it, Rupalidi? We
Yes,
have to come out of
definitely.
this situation victorious, and Poets have a, I guess, very major role over here through
I
their pen.
definitely believe I definitely believe that. I believe that, in fact, we have to be the give the clarion call. And
Hmm.
poetry should go out into the streets now. I feel that when we get an opportunity, it should not be confined to anthologies and books. And how many of us are literate? How many of us read? Now let us go into the marketplace and read a poem. If you're in a mall, in a grocer's shop, just take out your poem and start reading it out there. Why not? Why not try it? I did it for some time, before the pandemic. I did it before the pandemic, and I started writing in Hindi. Now, look what, this getting together has done. I know that, Dustin, you're learning Bangla, isn't it? Aren't you learning
Yes, a little
Bangla?
bit here and there.
He's learning
How about,
Bengali, yes.
Dustin lives in Texas, right? Is that where you live?
Texas.
Hmm.
Yes. And I live in a small town, Meerut, in India, and I know that Dustin is learning Bangla. Now, this is the power of this whole thing, that you come to know about people, you take interest in their lives, and it's so joyful. It's such a lovely thing to happen, and I think that we should go out. I started writing in Hindi, and so I would go, if I went to buy some vegetables, I would read out my poems to those people selling vegetables. Why should they be deprived of poetry? They live, the rural folk actually live within music and dance and poetry and songs and stuff like that. So why are we getting isolated, elitist? Now, go out. I think young people should. You should encourage young people to go out and
Hmm.
read their poems. Just stop somebody and say, "Here, stop, listen to my poem." I'm sure they love it. Just
The
do it.
poetry,
Antara, you can do it. In Bengal, they have a tradition of poetry being read. The Bowls, I think they were the great ones for going from place to place singing their poems and songs.
Hmm.
so it was a wonderful session actually, Rupalidi and Dustin. I guess it's one of the most heart-touching sessions. You know, so thank you, Dustin. Thank you, Rupalidi, for being with us today.
Thank you.
And
Thank
we poets, we'll have to carve out a better world for our next generation, of course.
Hmm.
For Gen Next, we have a bigger role to play. So with lots of hope, positive hope. So we
Yes.
will end today's session, and submissions of stories and poems are also going on for the project Disobedient Women. And registrations are also open for the writing program season 5. So for all of you out there, for further details, you may please visit www.tellmeyourstory.biz. So on this note, uh, let's hope we enter a better future, and stay well, stay blessed, and thank you everyone. Thank
Thank you
you.
so much.
Thank
Thank you
you.
so much. And I hope you
Goodbye,
find your.
good night. And Dustin, you have a good day.
You too. Thank you.
Thank you.
Excellent